Have you seen a film called Unbreakable?
Yeah, and it's one of my favorites. Harry and I, to leak this, Harry and I are actually covering that in our comics corner in episode 5, so next month.
Well, I've never been into comics, but that's a fantastic film. And what I loved about that, there's two things I loved about that. The first one was comics themselves. They, no, the whole story is about these are ancient stories that are passed down and they've exaggerated over time. That's why, you know, Superman is a Superman because he's been exaggerated over time. That's why when you draw Superman, he's got a bigger chest, a square, a jaw, and it's these are the stories that boys have always wanted to hear, and these are the characters and the people boys want to copy. They're the heroes, and that's why there's always a good guy, and that's why he's always protecting people, doing the right thing. That's why they always get hurt. That's why they always have a weakness, because you can't be a superhero without a weakness. Otherwise, you're not really a superhero, because you're not doing things and risking anything because you can't be it. That's why they've all got, a kryptonite, or in the film, Bruce Willis can't swim and can drown easily. And I love the way they put that into that movie. That these are the stories boys need to hear so they can be better men, better husbands, better people in society. Um, and so I'd like your take on that.
As for the Unbreakable point, I mean, not to spoil all Harry and I's content, because we'll be going into the sequels as well, but that is one of my favorite films of all time. And one of the main scenes that is most instructive as to the utility of storytelling, particularly for men, is the scene at the end where he holds up the newspaper to show that he saved the children from the serial killer. And the son's got tears in his eyes and just goes, and they both keep that secret. And that bit gets to me all the time. Like I'm a cold-hearted bastard, but that always chokes me up. And the reason is, especially as well, I think pop culture has largely supplanted religion. And for many men who are emasculated and growing up in single mother households without a positive masculine role model around, lots of them do retreat to these kinds of vicarious achievements in video games or over consuming terrible Marvel movies as a supplementary way of instructing values that they otherwise would have been raised with. Like, I'm very lucky to still have both sets of grandparents around, to still have my dad who made plenty of sacrifices growing up, and to this day says, "Oh, I didn't spend as much time with you as I want, but we were dirt poor." When I was born, he took any job he could get. He was driving buses for 15 grand a year, and then ended up working 9 shifts a week for 40K from the time I was about 5 to 15. Every house we've bought has been a wreck and it's been done up from scratch. We've only just finished doing this place up after 7 years, and we bought it with the original windows it had since 1918. And we tore up the carpets, and there were old Second World War papers as the underlay. It's a horrible place. So really worked from there. But that grafting attitude has taught me the value of hard work, and it's made me a bit of a workaholic, which isn't always that healthy. But I know lots of men who don't have that natural instinct for knowing what is good for them and for delaying gratification in order to pursue it. And that's why to be fair, I get a lot of flack from online morons when I say, delay gratification, don't sit around just consuming pornography and video games and whatnot all the time. Make yourself, not only the Jordan Peterson thing of treat yourself as someone worthy of helping, but constitute yourself as someone strong enough to care for those who deserve it, and then do that. Because, and I think it might be a failing in my part, but I know lots of men who don't really have the airy fairy romantic metaphysical sense of love that a lot of women or a lot of fiction does, but do see love as duty. And we find a lot of meaning in serving others who definitely deserve to be protected and provided for. And I think that is the main crux of the power fantasy of a superhero, or at least it was before it was perverted and subverted by progressives. And I think that's why hopefully our message resonates, and our attempts to reclaim and recontextualize the good stories like Harry and I do in Comics Corner, within the canon of Anglospheric values, that's an attempt to be a bulwark against the exact kind of progressivism that has left men feeling miserable and nihilistic. I'd much rather more Unbreakables than I would pregnant Jokers. I don't know if you saw that this week, but that sort of stuff just makes me want to tear my hair out.
No, I mean, everybody needs, especially everybody needs someone to look up to, someone to aspire to. That's how we get the best out of everybody. Boys, girls, men, women, black, white, gay, doesn't matter who you are. We all need people to aspire to, because if you've not got anyone to aspire to, that means you've reached the top. And me and you both know, no matter who you are in the world, you've not reached the top. There's always more you can do, more you can say. You can always better yourself. And with comics, let's go back to comics. What I like about comics again is the fact that although superheroes do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and almost every superhero is anonymous. They're not tweeting what they're doing. They're not saying, look what I've done. Aren't I amazing? Selfie. No, that's why they wear masks, because once you start getting credit for doing the right things, that then can warp what you do. Are you then doing because it's the right thing to do, or are you doing because of the credit you're going to receive for doing it? And then you're not sure why you're doing it. Do you start doing things slightly different because that gets you more credit? And then you go down the route of popularity then. And that's what superheroes are not. It's not about being popular. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons. And I don't care what anybody else says. Good examples, Batman. You know, from what I don't read comics, but from the films and all that, Batman at many times is considered a vigilante, is considered a criminal. But he doesn't care because he knows he's doing the right things. And I think comics have got a lot, especially for young boys, to show him the right thing to do in life. And then with the villains, that's why the villains are always ex-friends of the superheroes, because that teaches you that the villain isn't created in a lab. The villain isn't the devil. The villain is someone just like you, someone who was your friend, who took the easy route, who had some, bad luck, but then took the wrong path. And that's why the villains are always relatable as well, because we need to understand that the hero and the villains in all of us, it just depends what path we take, depends on which one comes to the front.
Well, your point about doing good for good's sake, I think that you can see with the progressive paradigm that's overtaken comics and basically preceded, actually around 2014 when Carl got involved in Gamergate. Pop culture preceded all of politics being taken over by this doctrine of the ultimate liberation of the will, like the trans activists say. I've got a man's soul in a woman's body, and therefore I must destroy the body to liberate my soul, because biology itself is oppression. That sort of long march of self-determination, it is exemplified by the interactions of heroes and villains in comics, because if the heroes are acting as a corrective measure to the presence of injustice, but they're not doing it for personal acclaim, then they must be fighting on behalf of some sort of natural law, something that C.S. Lewis would call the Tao. It's like the undercurrents of reality that's best to live in congruity with. And that predates us. That's the void before human consciousness, right? So if we're to live in concert with that, and that leads us to be most successful, then that means we don't necessarily just live for ourselves, and our values didn't come ex nihilo. It's something which we recognize rather than formulate. And that kind of syncs up with the idea of where Nietzsche got it wrong was, when you kill God, there's nothing after it. We can't transvalue and create our own values. We can only continually discover the things which predate us. But the villains aren't like the heroes, which are aligned with a set of eternal values that are corrective measures. They're one of two things. They're either like nihilistic hedonists, like the Joker, who run around and attract women like Harley Quinn and discolor their hair and do all sorts of things for their pleasure. And when you extricate some sort of objective value from your morals, you do just reduce all morality to like warring competing preferences. This is what the postmodernists are right about, except the postmodernists only get there because they got rid of God in the first place, or the Tao, or objective law, or whatever you want to call it, right? And so if you have those competing preferences, why should you delay gratification for the good, like continuing civilization, and not just endlessly consume and consume in the present? Why is not everything reduced down to hedonic calculus? And if everyone does that, trying to be this atomized consumer, freed of social bonds because somehow responsibility is tyranny, if everyone's doing that in concert, then civilization just mutually collapses while everyone's having an orgy and too busy to notice, right? And then the other villains are the utopian imperialists who wish to impose their self-formulated worldview on you. And I think you can see this as well with the perverse incentives of modern social media, because it has the dopamine hits of being reaffirmed by your tribe with likes, and it allows people who, rather than inherit values, which is de-egocentrizing, if they progenate values and then they define themselves as infallibly correct, that incentivizes narcissists, manipulative people, and psychopaths who only have the ability to appear charismatic short term, but burn themselves out in the long term, to rise quickly like the cream of the crop to the top of your movement. And suddenly your movement that is aiming for absolute power is led by the exact kind of person you don't want in charge of society. But unfortunately, the ability to provide a platform to as many people as possible, yes, it's fantastic. It's decentralized the knowledge distribution from the corporate press, and now we can just point and mock them. But unfortunately, within subcultures, it means a bunch of nutcases are running the show, and that's why we have to exist to push back on it.